They never thought a woman like her could shake the Pentagon to its core. When the Medal of Honor rolled across the cold military warehouse floor, no one knew it was the beginning of a 30-year conspiracy, a conspiracy that buried the truth about 17 American soldiers who died in a classified mission on the Afghanistan border. This story will take you on one lone woman's journey for justice, facing an entire system of power. Leave a comment if you ever served, because people like you deserve to hear this truth. Alaska in winter forgives nothing. The wind doesn't just blow, it punishes. The cold doesn't just chill, it threatens. And Fort Richardson, nestled against the white wilderness just outside Anchorage, stood like America's northern sentinel, a place where only the toughest soldiers were sent. January 2022. The temperature had dropped to 20 below. Ice crystals hung suspended in the air, catching the pale winter sun like tiny prisms, the kind of cold that makes metal brittle and men cautious. The Black Hawk helicopter descended through swirling snow, rotor beating against the Arctic air. Inside sat a single passenger, Sergeant Emily Shepard. Blonde hair pulled back in a tight braid, green eyes that gave away nothing. No unit patch on her shoulder, just standard issue winter camo and a worn duffel bag at her feet. The pilot glanced back, shouting over the engine roar. "First time at Richardson?" Emily nodded once. No smile, no words wasted. "Tough place," the pilot added. "Tougher people." She looked out at the vast emptiness below. Her breath fogged the window. "Good." The landing pad emerged from the whiteness. A lone figure waited below, hands thrust deep in the pockets of a heavy parka, military bearing evident even through layers of cold weather gear. Captain Jason Blackburn, 62 years old with a face carved by decades of service, former Special Forces, now commander of the training unit at Fort Richardson. The Black Hawk touched down and Emily stepped out, the Arctic air slapping her face like a reprimand. She approached Blackburn with measured steps, saluted crisply. "Sergeant Shepard reporting for duty, sir." Blackburn's eyes, blue as glacier ice, assessed her with the kind of scrutiny that missed nothing. A Vietnam veteran's son, raised on military bases, he'd spent 40 years serving his country. He'd commanded men in Desert Storm, Iraq, Afghanistan, seen the best and worst humanity had to offer. And something about this transfer midwinter, no warning, no explanation, felt wrong. "Welcome to the edge of nowhere, Sergeant." His voice was gravel and whiskey. "Your transfer papers arrived yesterday. Unusual timing." "Yes, sir. Most of your file is redacted. Care to fill in the blanks?" The wind howled between them. Emily's face revealed nothing. "Just here to serve, sir." Blackburn nodded slowly. "Follow me. We'll get you settled." The base spread out before them, utilitarian buildings constructed for function, not beauty. Soldiers moved with purpose, their breath clouding around them. Fort Richardson wasn't a showcase installation where politicians brought visitors. It was where the Army trained for the harshest conditions on Earth, where mistakes meant death, where excellence wasn't praised, it was expected. As they walked, Blackburn spoke without looking back. "You've been assigned to Alpha Company. Training rotation starts tomorrow at 0000. You'll bunk in the NCO quarters, Building C." "Understood, sir." "One more thing, Shepard." He stopped, turning to face her. "We're a tight unit here. Everybody pulls their weight. Everybody has each other's back. No lone wolves, no heroes. Just soldiers doing their job. Clear?" "Crystal, sir." Emily watched him walk away, his footprints filling with fresh snow almost immediately. She stood motionless for a moment, letting the cold seep into her bones. It was nothing compared to the ice she carried inside. The mess hall at Fort Richardson was built during the Cold War, a cavernous space with fluorescent lighting that hummed overhead and long metal tables bolted to the floor. Steam rose from industrial serving trays, carrying the scent of institutional cooking through the room. Outside, darkness had already fallen, though it was only 1700 hours. Emily entered quietly, moving to the end of the chow line. She felt the stares without acknowledging them. New faces were rare at Richardson, especially midwinter. Female sergeants without unit patches, rarer still. A voice carried across the room. "Hey, fresh meat!" She didn't turn, kept her eyes forward as she moved through the line. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans that had surrendered their color hours ago. When she reached for a tray, a hand came down on hers. Corporal Cole Tucker, 25 years old, built like a linebacker. 3 tours in Afghanistan and an attitude that had kept him at corporal despite his combat experience. "I'm talking to you, new blood." His voice carried the swagger of a man performing for an audience. "What did you do to get sent to this frozen hellhole?" Emily met his gaze, steady, calm. "Just getting my dinner, Corporal." Tucker stepped closer. Too close. "No unit patch? No combat badges? What are you, some Pentagon princess sent up here for photo ops?" The mess hall had grown quiet. 50 pairs of eyes watching, testing, judging. The ritual as old as armies themselves. Establish the hierarchy, find the weaknesses, determine who would be accepted and who would remain an outsider. "Excuse me, Corporal." Emily's voice remained level. Tucker smirked, looking back at his buddies. "Guess they don't teach manners at whatever desk you've been hiding behind." He reached for her duffel bag, which sat at her feet. Before she could react, he yanked it up, the worn canvas slipping from her grasp. "Let's see what a princess packs for Alaska." The bag hit the floor with enough force to split the seam. Personal items spilled across the linoleum, folded clothes, a weathered paperback, toiletries, and something else. Something that caught the harsh fluorescent light and reflected it back in a dull golden gleam. The Medal of Honor. It rolled across the floor, spinning like a coin before settling at Tucker's boots. The small 5-pointed star hanging from a blue ribbon, attached to a gold medal engraved with Minerva's profile. The highest military decoration awarded by the United States government, given only to those who distinguish themselves conspicuously by gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his or her life above and beyond the call of duty while engaged in an action against an enemy of the United States. The mess hall forgot how to breathe. Tucker stared down at the medal, his face draining of color. "What the hell?" Emily didn't move to retrieve it, didn't explain, didn't defend. She stood motionless, her eyes fixed on the medal as if it belonged to someone else. The silence stretched until it became painful. Finally, a master sergeant from the far corner, a man with gray at his temples and a 10th Mountain Division patch on his shoulder, stood and crossed the room. He knelt, picked up the medal with reverent hands, and offered it to Emily. "I believe this is yours, Sergeant." She accepted it without a word, tucking it into her pocket. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, but in the silence everyone heard. "You should ask the 7 men who didn't make it back. They might disagree with your assessment, Corporal." She gathered her scattered belongings and left without taking a meal, the double doors swinging behind her like a final punctuation mark. In her wake, the mess hall remained silent. Tucker stood frozen, his face a mask of confusion and growing shame. Eventually someone coughed. A fork clinked against a tray. Conversations resumed, but changed, hushed, speculative. The stranger with the Medal of Honor had arrived at Fort Richardson. No. Captain Blackburn's office was sparse. A metal desk, a filing cabinet, a map of Alaska on one wall, and a photo of soldiers in desert camo on another. A single window looked out over the training grounds, now covered in snow and darkness. He sat in a squeaking chair, a folder open before him. Emily Shepard's service record, mostly black lines where text should be, classified, redacted, hidden. A knock at the door. "Enter." Master Sergeant Daniel Roberts stepped in, closing the door behind him. At 55, Roberts had seen enough of war to know its true cost. His left hand was missing 2 fingers. Baghdad, 2004. "You heard about what happened in the mess?" Roberts asked. Blackburn nodded. "The Medal of Honor, I know." "You weren't surprised." "I suspected something. Nobody gets transferred here mid-rotation without a reason." Blackburn tapped the folder. "Her record reads like a censored letter from a war zone, more black than white." Roberts settled into the chair across from the desk. "Tucker's pretty shaken up. Word's spreading through the barracks like wildfire. Some think she stole it, others think she's some kind of undercover brass checking on the unit. And what do you think?" "I think people who earn that medal don't advertise it, and they sure as hell don't carry it around in their duffel bag." Blackburn turned the folder so Robertson could see it. Only thing not redacted is her deployment history. 3 tours in Afghanistan, last stationed at Forward Operating Base Sandstone in 2019. After that, nothing for 2 years until this transfer. Sandstone? Roberts frowned. Wasn't that where were we lost a special forces team? Yes. Officially labeled a training accident. Blackburn's fingers drummed on the desk. But you and I both know the military doesn't hand out medals of honor for accidents. The two men sat in silence, the implications hanging between them like smoke. Keep an eye on her, Blackburn finally said. Discreetly. I want to know who she talks to, what she does. Something bigger is happening here, and I don't like being kept in the dark. Roberts nodded and stood to leave. One more thing, Blackburn added. Winter warfare exercise starts next week. I'm putting Shepard in charge of Bravo Squad. Sir, the men won't like taking orders from an unknown. That's exactly why I'm doing it. I want to see what she's made of, and I want to see who's watching her. After Roberts left, Blackburn turned to the window. Beyond the glass, snow fell in thick, silent curtains. Somewhere out there in the darkness, Emily Shepard was carrying secrets. And in his 4 decades of service, Blackburn had learned one immutable truth. Secrets in the military always came with a price, usually paid in blood. Emily's quarters were standard military issue, a single bed with hospital corners, a metal desk, a locker for personal items, a window that looked out on endless white. The NCO quarters were quiet. Most sergeants were still at dinner or in the rec room. She sat on the edge of the bed, the Medal of Honor in her palm. The gold caught the light, throwing it back distorted. She hadn't planned on anyone seeing it, hadn't planned on the questions that would follow. Emily placed the medal in the desk drawer and locked it. Then she pulled out a small notebook, leather-bound, worn at the edges. Inside were names, 7 names, men who had died on a mountain in Afghanistan while the world looked the other way. Staff Sergeant Marcus Collins, Sergeant First Class David Ramirez, Specialist Terrence Washington, Corporal James Henderson, Private First Class Andrew Kim, Private First Class Luis Ortiz, Private Michael Chen. She traced each name with her finger. A ritual, a promise. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She closed the notebook, tucked it under her pillow. Enter. The door opened to reveal a woman in her late 30s, Staff Sergeant Elaine Harper, intelligence specialist, short dark hair, sharp eyes that missed nothing. Thought you might be hungry. Harper held out a wrapped sandwich. Since you didn't get a chance to eat. Emily hesitated, then accepted it. Thank you. Mind if I come in? Emily gestured to the desk chair. Harper entered, closing the door behind her. Word travels fast around here, Harper said, sitting down, especially about medals of honor appearing out of nowhere. I don't want to talk about it. Fair enough. Harper glanced around the sparse room. But you should know, people will keep asking. Small base, long winter. Not much entertainment besides gossip. Emily unwrapped the sandwich. Turkey, mayo, American cheese, military simplicity. Let them talk. Harper studied her for a moment. I was at Bagram when they brought in the survivors from Sandstone. 2 men, barely alive. 1 woman, you, unconscious but stable, 7 body bags. Emily's hand froze halfway to her mouth. You were there? Intelligence Division. I read the official report. Training accident. Helicopter crash in bad weather. Harper leaned forward. But I also saw the bodies. That wasn't a crash, Shepard. Those men were executed. The sandwich remained untouched. Emily's face gave away nothing, but her eyes, for just a moment, flashed with something like recognition. Why are you telling me this? Because whatever brought you to Richardson isn't a coincidence. And because, in my experience, medals of honor don't get handed out for surviving accidents. Harper stood to leave. Just watch your back. The ice isn't the only dangerous thing around here. After Harper left, Emily moved to the window. Beyond the glass, Fort Richardson slept under its blanket of snow, lights glowing like earthbound stars. Somewhere out there were answers. Somewhere out there was the truth about what happened on that mountain. And somewhere out there was the man who had left her for dead. The week passed in a blur of routine. Physical training at Euro 500, breakfast at Euro 630, equipment checks, Cold weather survival training. Weapons maintenance. Emily kept to herself, eating alone, speaking only when spoken to. The whispers followed her. Medal of Honor. Hero. Fraud. Mystery. Sergeant Mike Reynolds made no secret of his disdain. At 40, with multiple deployments to Iraq and the scars to prove it, Reynolds commanded respect from the younger soldiers. His openly hostile glares toward Emily did not go unnoticed. "They're giving command positions to untested transfers now," he muttered loudly in the equipment room. "Next thing you know, we'll be taking orders from Pentagon paper pushers who've never seen combat." Emily continued checking her gear, methodical and focused. She didn't acknowledge the comment. Reynolds stepped closer. "I looked you up, Shepard. No record of any Medal of Honor recipient with your name. So either the records are classified or you're carrying stolen valor in your pocket." She met his gaze then, calm, unmoved. "Is there something you need help with, Sergeant Reynolds?" "Yeah, an explanation. Men I know, good men, have died trying to earn that medal. And here you show up out of nowhere with one and suddenly you're put in charge of a squad for the winter exercise? Something doesn't add up." Before she could respond, Captain Blackburn entered the room. Everyone snapped to attention. "At ease," Blackburn said, his eyes scanning the room. "Final briefing for tomorrow's exercise in 10 minutes. Squad leaders report to the command tent." As Emily moved to leave, Reynolds blocked her path. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Whatever game you're playing, Shepard, it won't end well. Not for you." She brushed past him without a word, feeling his eyes on her back as she left. The command tent was heated by portable units that hummed in the corners, pushing back the Arctic cold. Maps were spread across folding tables. Satellite imagery of the training area, 30 square miles of Alaskan wilderness. Squad leaders gathered around, their breath visible despite the heaters. Blackburn stood at the head of the table, his weathered face illuminated by the harsh overhead lights. "Tomorrow's exercise simulates a scenario we might face if tensions with Russia escalate. Two forces, Bravo and Charlie, will navigate to a downed aircraft containing sensitive materials. Objective: secure the package and extract to safety." He pointed to the map. "Terrain is mountainous. Weather forecast calls for temperatures of -15, winds at 20 knots, possible snowfall. Real-world conditions, real-world consequences." His finger traced a route. "Bravo Squad, led by Sergeant Shepard, will approach from the southeast. Charlie Squad, led by Sergeant Reynolds from the northwest. First team to secure the package and reach the extraction point wins." Reynolds couldn't hide his disapproval. "Sir, with all due respect, shouldn't squad leaders have experience with the terrain? Sergeant Shepard just arrived." Blackburn's gaze was unwavering. "Are you questioning my command decisions, Sergeant?" "No, sir, just concerned about operational safety." "Your concern is noted." Blackburn's tone made it clear the discussion was over. "Communications will be limited to simulate battlefield conditions. GPS might experience intermittent failures." His eyes lingered on Emily for just a moment longer than necessary, a silent message passing between them. This wasn't just a training exercise. This was a test. "Dismissed. Get your squads ready. 0600 departure." As the officers filed out, Blackburn called out, "Sergeant Shepard, a word." When they were alone, Blackburn's voice dropped. "Tomorrow isn't just about proving yourself to the men. It's about proving yourself to me." "I understand, sir." "Do you?" He studied her face. "Because I've seen your type before. Soldiers carrying ghosts. Soldiers with missions that go beyond orders. Whatever brought you to my base, Shepard, remember this. I'm responsible for every person under my command. If your presence puts any of them at risk, there will be consequences." Emily met his gaze unflinchingly. "I'm just here to do my job, sir." "See that you do." He nodded toward the door. "Good luck tomorrow. You're going to need it." Dawn painted the Alaskan wilderness in shades of lavender and gold. The sun, reluctant to rise in winter, cast long shadows across the snow-covered landscape. Breath froze instantly in the air, creating miniature clouds that hung suspended before dissipating. Bravo Squad assembled at the southern perimeter of Fort Richardson. 8 soldiers in white winter camouflage, faces covered by balaclavas, weapons at the ready. their breaths synchronized in visible puffs of condensation. Emily stood before them, her own winter gear indistinguishable from theirs, except for the sergeant's stripes on her arm. Final equipment check. Comms, navigation, weapons, survival gear. We move in 5. Private First Class Ethan Miller, 19 years old, Oklahoma accent, first Alaska winter, approached her nervously. Sergeant, the men are saying Charlie Squad has the advantage. Sergeant Reynolds knows this terrain like the back of his hand. Emily checked her compass, her face revealing nothing. Then we'll have to be smarter, won't we? At exactly 0600, both squads departed base from opposite sides. Blackburn watched from the command center, monitors showing their GPS trackers moving like slow-motion fireflies across a digital map. Bravo Squad moved in formation through the forest. Snow crunched beneath their boots. Wind whispered through pine branches, heavy with ice. Each step was deliberate, conserving energy, maintaining spacing. Emily led from the front, her eyes constantly scanning, not just for the objective, but for signs most soldiers would miss. 3 hours in, their radio crackled to life. Captain Blackburn's voice, distorted by static. Be advised, weather system moving in from the north. Visibility will be reduced. Exercise continues. Emily checked her GPS. The signal flickered, then stabilized. They were making good time, covering ground efficiently despite the challenging terrain. Then she noticed something. A pattern in the static, not random, rhythmic, intentional. She raised her fist, signaling the squad to halt. Comms check, each soldier reported in. All radios experiencing the same interference. Corporal Jenkins, communications specialist, frowned. Might be the weather, Sergeant, or the mountains blocking the signal. Emily removed her glove, feeling the cold bite at her fingers as she adjusted the radio frequency. The static changed pitch but didn't diminish. This isn't weather interference. She knelt in the snow, pulling out her map. The squad gathered around. New plan, we go dark, no radio communications unless absolutely necessary, no GPS. Jenkins looked alarmed. Ma'am, how will we navigate? The old-fashioned way. She pointed to landmarks on the map, then to the corresponding features on the horizon. That ridgeline, the river valley, the sun. Private Miller shook his head. Sergeant Reynolds will have the same issues. We're still at a disadvantage. Emily folded the map decisively. No, we're not. Because Reynolds will keep using his GPS and radio. He trusts technology, I don't. She stood, brushing snow from her knees. Someone is jamming our communications. This isn't part of the exercise. The squad exchanged glances. Doubt, confusion, concern. Listen carefully, Emily continued. This isn't just about finding a fake package anymore. Someone is testing us. Testing me. We proceed as if this is a real-world scenario with real-world threats. Clear? Reluctant nods all around. Good. Follow me, maintain formation, and stay alert. This just became more than a game. They moved deeper into the wilderness, Emily leading with a confidence that belied her short time at Richardson. She navigated by natural markers, reading the terrain like a language. Where the path grew steep, she found alternate routes. Where the snow was deep, she showed them how to move without exhausting themselves. Private Miller whispered to Corporal Jenkins, "Where did she learn to move like that? Doesn't seem like something they teach at Pentagon desks." By midday, the promised storm arrived. Snow fell in thick, swirling curtains. Visibility dropped to less than 50 meters. The temperature plummeted further. This was weather that killed, weather that made the Arctic notorious, weather that turned training exercises into survival situations. Emily gathered the squad in the shelter of a rock outcropping. We're 3 kilometers from the objective. The storm works to our advantage. Charlie's squad will be slowed more than us. But it also increases our risks. Stay close. If you can't see the person in front of you, you're too far back. As they prepared to move out, Emily noticed something. Tracks in the snow. Fresh, made by boots, not wildlife, and heading in the same direction they were. She knelt, examining them. The depth, the pattern, the stride length. Not Reynolds' squad. They would be approaching from the northwest. These came from the east. Someone else was out here. Emily's mind raced back to Afghanistan, to Sandstone, to the mountain where everything went wrong. The same feeling crept up her spine, the sensation of being watched, hunted. She rejoined the squad, her expression betraying nothing. Change of plans. We double time to the objective. Now. They pushed through the storm, fighting wind that tried to freeze the breath in their lungs and snow that threatened to bury their footprints as soon as they were made. Emily set a punishing pace, but no one complained. Something in her urgency communicated itself to the squad. This wasn't just about winning anymore. At 1400 hours, they crested a ridge and saw it, a small aircraft partially buried in snow in the valley below. The downed plane for the exercise. Emily raised her binoculars. No sign of Charlie's squad yet, but there was movement around the aircraft. Figures in white, nearly invisible against the snow. Down, she whispered, and the squad dropped to their stomachs in the snow. We've got company. 4 individuals at the objective. Not Charlie's squad. Jenkins squinted through the swirling snow. Base personnel? Part of the exercise? No, Emily's voice was certain. These aren't our people. She crawled backward, gesturing for the squad to follow her down the protected side of the ridge. Once out of sight of the valley, she gathered them close. Listen carefully. This exercise just turned real. Those men down there are running a counterintelligence operation. They're jamming our communications, tracking our movements, and they've reached the objective before us. Miller looked skeptical. How can you be sure, Sergeant? Maybe it's part of the scenario Captain Blackburn set up. Because I've seen this before. Her eyes grew distant for just a moment. Afghanistan, 2019. Same tactics. Same signal pattern on the radio. She refocused on the squad. We have 2 options. Retreat to base or secure that objective and find out who's running this operation. The squad looked at each other. Uncertainty, fear, but also curiosity, and beneath it all, a growing respect for the mysterious sergeant with the Medal of Honor. Corporal Jenkins spoke first. What's the plan, Sergeant? Emily smiled for the first time since arriving at Fort Richardson. It wasn't a smile of joy, but of grim determination. We're going to beat them at their own game. Captain Blackburn paced the command center, his face illuminated by the blue glow of monitors. The GPS signals from both squads had been stationary for over an hour. No radio contact. The storm had intensified beyond forecast predictions. Try again, he ordered the communications officer. Bravo squad, this is base. Report status, over. Static answered. Charlie squad, this is base. Report status, over. More static. Blackburn ran a hand over his face. What had started as a routine training exercise was becoming a potential emergency. Alaska didn't forgive mistakes. Men and women had frozen to death less than a mile from safety in storms like this. The door burst open, bringing a swirl of snow and Arctic air. Master Sergeant Roberts, his beard crusted with ice, stamped his boots as he entered. Sir, we've got a situation. The monitoring station at the eastern perimeter picked up unauthorized transmissions. Someone's operating in our training area. Blackburn's eyes narrowed. Russians? Don't think so. Signal patterns don't match known Russian protocols. And there's something else. Roberts lowered his voice. The chopper pilot who brought Sergeant Shepard here? He received orders this morning for immediate transfer to Fort Drum. When he went to clear out his locker, it had been emptied already. His files are gone. Blackburn turned back to the monitors, his face hardening. Get the quick reaction force ready. Full winter gear, combat load. And find me someone who knows what the hell happened at Sandstone in 2019. In the valley below the ridge, 4 figures moved around the downed aircraft with military precision. Their white winter gear bore no insignia, no identification. They had set up a perimeter with motion sensors and signal jammers, equipment far beyond what would be used in a training exercise. Hidden in the trees at the edge of the clearing, Emily watched through binoculars. Her squad was positioned in a semicircle, awaiting her signal. 4 targets, she whispered to Jenkins beside her. 2 at the aircraft, 2 on perimeter. Standard counterintelligence sweep pattern. Who are they? Emily's jaw tightened. Same people who tried to bury what happened at Sandstone. Same people who gave me a medal to keep me quiet. She put down the binoculars and turned to the squad. Here's the plan. We create a diversion to the north. When they respond, we take the position from the south. Non-lethal force only. These are Americans, not enemies. But they are conducting an unauthorized operation on a U.S. military base, which makes them hostile actors. Questions? There were none. Despite the cold, despite the danger, despite the uncertainty, Bravo Squad was united now. In less than a day, Sergeant Emily Shepard had transformed them from skeptics to believers. The diversion was simple but effective. 2 smoke grenades and a carefully arranged set of tracks in the snow, suggesting a squad trying to approach from the north. As expected, 3 of the 4 figures moved to investigate, leaving just one guarding the aircraft. Emily waited until they were out of sight, then gave the signal. Bravo Squad moved like ghosts through the falling snow, their white camouflage rendering them nearly invisible. The lone guard never saw them coming. Jenkins took him down with a textbook takedown. Quick, efficient, silent. Secure him, Emily ordered, moving toward the aircraft. The package for the exercise would be inside, a red metal box with training materials. But Emily suspected there might be something else, something these men were really after. The aircraft was a decommissioned small cargo plane, partially buried to simulate a crash. Emily entered through the side door, weapon raised. Empty, just as it should be for a training exercise. The red box sat on what had once been the navigator's seat, but next to it was something else. A laptop, military grade, secured with biometric locks. "Sergeant," Miller's urgent whisper came from outside. "They're coming back!" Emily grabbed both the red box and the laptop, securing them in her pack. "Fall back to position 2. Move!" Bravo Squad melted back into the forest just as the 3 figures returned to the clearing. Their angry shouts carried through the storm as they discovered their missing comrade and the empty aircraft. From their fallback position in a dense stand of pines, Emily watched through binoculars as the men regrouped. One of them spoke into a satellite phone, the kind that would work despite the jammers affecting standard military communications. "They're calling for backup," she said. "We need to move. Now." The storm had grown fiercer, the wind howling between the trees, driving snow horizontally. Visibility was down to less than 20 meters. Perfect cover for their escape, but also perfect conditions for freezing to death if they became disoriented. Emily led them east, away from both the mysterious operatives and from where Charlie's squad would be approaching. Her navigation was unerring, finding passages through the difficult terrain that others would have missed. After an hour of hard marching, she called a halt in a protected ravine. "Check for cold injuries. Hydrate. We move again in 5 minutes." Miller approached her, his young face serious beneath his snow-crusted balaclava. "Sergeant, what's really going on? Who were those men? What's on that laptop?" Emily studied him for a moment. "The truth, Miller, is that sometimes the people giving the orders aren't the good guys. Sometimes the mission isn't what you're told it is." "Like at Sandstone?" Her eyes hardened. "Yes, like at Sandstone." Before she could elaborate, the crack of a rifle shot echoed through the trees. Snow exploded from a trunk just inches from Emily's head. "Down!" she shouted, pulling Miller to the ground as more shots followed. The squad took cover behind trees and rocks, returning fire with training rounds, non-lethal but still capable of disabling an opponent. Through the swirling snow, dark figures advanced, not the 4 from the aircraft. These wore standard military winter gear. "Charlie Squad." "Hold fire!" Emily shouted. "Those are our people!" But Charlie Squad continued firing, advancing in a standard infantry assault pattern. Leading them was Sergeant Reynolds, his face twisted with anger even through the balaclava. "Surrender the package and the laptop!" he shouted. "Now!" Emily's mind raced. How did Reynolds know about the laptop? It wasn't part of the exercise. Unless Reynolds is working with them, she said quietly to Jenkins beside her. "Pass the word. We treat Charlie Squad as hostile." What followed was a chaotic firefight through the snowy forest. Training rounds whizzed through the air, striking trees and equipment. Both squads were well-trained, but Bravo had one advantage: Emily Shepard. She moved them in coordinated retreats, drawing Charlie Squad deeper into the forest, separating them, confusing them. Each member of Bravo Squad knew exactly what to do, their trust in their new sergeant now absolute. Finally, Emily led them to a frozen stream bed, a natural choke point where Charlie Squad would have to bunch up to pursue. There they set their ambush. When Reynolds led his men into the narrow passage, Bravo Squad struck from all sides. The surprise was complete. Within minutes, all of Charlie Squad was down, hit by multiple training rounds that would register as kills in their combat simulators. All except Reynolds, who stood facing Emily across the frozen stream, his weapon trained on her chest. "It was you at Sandstone," he snarled. "You're the one who survived." Emily's weapon remained steady, aimed at his center mass. "And you're the one who's been helping cover it up. What did they offer you, Reynolds? Promotion? Money? Or did they just threaten you like they threatened me? You don't understand what you're involved in, Shepard. This goes all the way to the top. The Secretary, the Joint Chiefs. You think your Medal of Honor will protect you? They gave it to you to control you, to keep you quiet. And when that didn't work, they sent you here, to the edge of nowhere where accidents happen all the time. Around them, the storm raged, snow swirling between them like a living thing. Both squads watched in stunned silence, the training exercise forgotten. "I'm not here to be controlled," Emily said, her voice carrying despite the wind. "I'm here for the truth, and for justice for the 7 men who died on that mountain." Reynolds laughed, a harsh sound. "Justice? There's no justice for what happened at Sandstone. Only survival. And you won't survive this, Shepard." His finger tightened on the trigger. But before he could fire, a shot rang out from the trees. Reynolds jerked, his weapon falling from suddenly limp fingers. A real bullet, not a training round, had struck his shoulder. Emily spun toward the source of the shot. Through the falling snow, a figure emerged. Captain Blackburn, rifle raised, flanked by a dozen armed soldiers. The quick reaction force. "Stand down, all of you." Blackburn's voice cut through the storm. "This exercise is terminated." As the QRF secured both squads, Blackburn approached Emily. His face was grim, his eyes troubled. "You've got a lot of explaining to do, Sergeant Shepard." Emily nodded slowly, reaching into her pack. She withdrew the laptop. "So do a lot of other people, sir." The base hospital at Fort Richardson was warm after the bitter cold of the wilderness. Emily sat on an examination table, a blanket around her shoulders, as a medic checked her for signs of frostbite or hypothermia. Captain Blackburn entered, his expression unreadable. He dismissed the medic with a nod. When they were alone, he spoke. "Reynolds is in surgery. He'll live, but his military career is over." The 4 men at the crash site vanished before the QRF could apprehend them. "And that laptop you recovered?" "Blank, wiped remotely the moment we tried to access it." Emily showed no surprise. "They're thorough, always have been." "What exactly is they, Sergeant? Because I've spent the last 4 hours on secure calls with the Pentagon, and nobody seems to know anything about unauthorized personnel operating on my base or about what really happened at Sandstone." She met his gaze steadily. "With respect, sir, they know. They just won't admit it." Blackburn pulled up a chair, sitting so they were eye to eye. "I lost men under my command in Iraq because intelligence was withheld. I won't let that happen here. No more games, Shepard. I want the truth." Emily was silent for a long moment, weighing her options, measuring the man before her. Finally, she spoke. "In 2019, my unit was deployed to FOB Sandstone in Afghanistan. Officially, we were there to train local forces. Unofficially, we were securing a black site research facility in the mountains. We were told it was developing counterterrorism technologies. We weren't told what kind." She paused, the memories washing over her like the pain of a wound reopened. "On April 17th, there was a security breach. My squad was sent to investigate. What we found," her voice faltered for the first time, "what we found wasn't counterterrorism research. It was biological weapons testing on prisoners, some of them American." Blackburn's face remained impassive, but his knuckles whitened as his hands gripped the chair's armrests. "We documented everything, planned to report it up the chain of command. But before we could, our communications were jammed, just like today. We were ambushed returning to base. 7 men died. I was wounded, left for dead. When I woke up, I was in Germany, being told I was a hero, being given a Medal of Honor for a rescue mission that never happened, for saving lives that were actually taken." She met Blackburn's eyes, her own hard as flint. "I spent 2 years gathering evidence, tracking the operation back to its source. It goes high, sir, cabinet level. And they know I'm looking. That's why I was sent here, isolated, discredited, set up to fail or die trying. And the laptop? Insurance. I knew they'd be monitoring the exercise. Knew they'd want to see if I'd broken under the pressure. The laptop was bait to confirm who's involved. Blackburn stood and walked to the window. Beyond the glass, the storm had passed. Stars glittered in the clear Alaskan night, cold and distant. "You are playing a dangerous game, Shepard." "Not a game, sir, a mission. Those 7 men were my brothers. They deserve the truth. They deserve justice." He turned back to her. "And you think you'll find it here? At the edge of nowhere?" "I already have." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device, a signal tracker. The men who set up at the crash site, they used a very specific communications protocol. Only one unit uses it, the same unit that ambushed us at Sandstone. And now I know they're still operational, still taking orders from someone with enough authority to run operations on U.S. soil. Blackburn's expression darkened. "Do you have any idea what you're up against? These people can make anyone disappear. They can rewrite history. They can turn patriots into traitors with a single press release." "I know exactly what I'm up against, sir." Emily's voice was steel. "The question is, what side are you on?" Before he could answer, the door opened. A nurse entered, carrying a sealed envelope. "This was left for Sergeant Shepard at the desk, no sender." Emily accepted the envelope, watching the nurse leave before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. As she read it, her face drained of color. Blackburn moved closer. "What is it?" She handed him the note. 7 words written in a firm, masculine hand. "You were never supposed to come back." "Whose handwriting is that?" Blackburn asked. Emily's eyes were distant, seeing another time, another place. "Colonel Walter Harrington, my former CO, the man who nominated me for the Medal of Honor." "And the man who tried to have you killed?" "Yes." She stood, shedding the blanket. "And now he knows I'm coming for him." Blackburn placed a hand on her arm, stopping her. "Not alone, you're not." His weathered face showed the resolve of a soldier who had made his decision. "Whatever happened at Sandstone, whoever is behind it, they operated on my base. They put my people at risk. That makes it my fight too." Outside, the aurora borealis began to dance across the night sky, green and purple ribbons of light. Nature's reminder that even in the darkest places, illumination could be found. Emily looked at the note again, then at the Medal of Honor still in her pocket. "They gave me this to silence me. Instead, it's going to be their downfall." In the hallway outside the hospital room, a figure watched through the narrow window. Staff Sergeant Elaine Harper, intelligence specialist, her face thoughtful. She lifted a secure phone to her ear and spoke quietly. "She found the tracker, just like you said she would, and she's not alone anymore." She listened for a moment. "Yes, sir, I understand. Phase 2 begins now." As Harper walked away, Emily Shepard's voice drifted through the partially open door. "Tomorrow we start finding answers." The war had come to Fort Richardson, a war of secrets and shadows, a war that had begun on a mountain in Afghanistan and would end in the snowy wilderness of Alaska, a war for truth, for justice, for the 7 men who never came home. Morning at Fort Richardson arrived with the reluctant light of an Alaskan January. The sun barely cleared the mountain peaks, casting long blue shadows across the snow-covered parade ground. The air was still, the kind of cold that seemed to crystallize sound itself. Emily Shepard stood at her window, watching soldiers move between buildings with the hurried gait of men and women trying to minimize their exposure to the elements. Her breath fogged the glass as her mind raced through the events of the previous day. The training exercise, the mysterious operatives, the confrontation with Reynolds, the note from Colonel Harrington. "You were never supposed to come back." A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Captain Blackburn entered without waiting for an answer, his face grim beneath his garrison cap. "Pack your gear," he said. "We're leaving in 20 minutes." Emily didn't move. "Where to?" "Fairbanks. There's someone there you need to meet." Blackburn handed her a folder. "These are the official reports from yesterday's incident. Training accident, equipment malfunction, Reynolds being treated for self-inflicted injuries." She scanned the documents, her expression hardening. "This is all lies." "Welcome to the game, Shepard. The game you decided to play." He checked his watch. 19 minutes now. Pack warm. Where we're going, the cold is more honest than the people. The drive to Fairbanks took 4 hours along the park's highway. Snow-covered mountains lined the route. their peaks disappearing into low-hanging clouds. Blackburn drove in silence for the first hour, his weathered hands steady on the wheel of the military Humvee. Finally, he spoke. "I made some calls last night, unofficial channels, old friends who still owe me favors." Emily waited, her eyes on the endless white landscape passing outside. Walter Harrington retired from active duty in 2020, full honors, now works as a consultant for Meridian Defense Solutions. "Military contractor," Emily said flatly. "One of the biggest, specialized in unconventional warfare technologies." Blackburn's mouth twisted around the euphemism. "They've had contracts in every conflict zone since Desert Storm." "And Sandstone?" Officially, Forward Operating Base Sandstone was decommissioned in December 2019. No record of any research facility in the area. Emily's jaw tightened. There were 17 buildings dug into that mountainside, labs, barracks, command center, just gone. According to official records, they never existed. Blackburn glanced at her. "But according to my sources, there was a lot of air traffic in and out of that region in the weeks after your incident. Heavy transport, the kind used for major equipment movement." They drove in silence again, both processing the implications. Mountains gave way to forests, forests to scattered settlements. Smoke rose from chimneys and straight columns, undisturbed by wind. "Who are we meeting in Fairbanks?" Emily finally asked. "Master Sergeant Frank Morrison, retired Green Beret, one of the best trackers and wilderness specialists the Army ever produced." Blackburn's voice took on a reverent quality. "Served in Vietnam, Desert Storm, early Afghanistan. Man's a legend in Special Forces circles." "And he's connected to Sandstone?" "Not directly. But in '91, his unit discovered something during a recon mission in Iraq. Something that was subsequently buried so deep even the Pentagon archives don't acknowledge it existed." Emily turned to face him fully. "How do you know all this?" Blackburn's eyes remained fixed on the road. "Because I was there. Lieutenant Blackburn back then, second in command of the unit. What we found," he shook his head, "let's just say some nightmares don't fade with time." The outskirts of Fairbanks appeared through the falling snow. Not a major metropolis, but a frontier city, practical, hardy, built to withstand the brutal Alaskan winters. Buildings huddled together as if for warmth. Streets were cleared with military precision, snow piled high along the curbs. Blackburn turned onto a side road that wound into the hills east of the city. The homes grew more scattered, more isolated. Finally, he pulled up to a log cabin set back from the road, surrounded by tall pines. Smoke curled from a stone chimney. No other houses were visible. "Morrison doesn't trust easily," Blackburn said as he cut the engine. "Don't expect a warm welcome." The front door opened before they could knock. Master Sergeant Frank Morrison stood in the doorway, a shotgun held casually in the crook of his arm. At 72, his body was still that of a soldier, lean, alert, dangerous. His face was a topographic map of lines and creases, his eyes the pale blue of glacial ice, white hair cut in the same military style he'd worn for 50 years. "Jason Blackburn," he said, his voice like gravel under boots. "Thought you died in Iraq." "Not for lack of trying," Blackburn answered. "Good to see you, Frank." Morrison's gaze shifted to Emily, assessing her with the practiced eye of a man who had sized up both enemies and allies in the world's most dangerous places. "This her?" "Sergeant Emily Shepard, the one I told you about." Morrison stepped back from the door. "Better come in then. Storm's moving in." The interior of the cabin was sparse but comfortable. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, its flames casting dancing shadows across the room. Bookshelves lined another wall. Military history, wilderness survival, philosophy. A wooden desk beneath the window held maps and notebooks arranged with military precision. But it was the third wall that caught Emily's attention. Photos, dozens of them. Men in various uniforms spanning decades of American military history. Vietnam, Desert Storm, Afghanistan, Iraq, and in many of them, a younger Frank Morrison, his face less lined, but his eyes just as piercing. Morrison followed her gaze. Dead men, most of them now, some by enemy fire, Some by their own hand when the memories got too heavy. Some just wasted away, carrying burdens no man was meant to shoulder. He gestured to 3 chairs arranged near the fire. Sit. We've got history to discuss. As they settled, Morrison pulled a worn leather journal from a shelf. Blackburn tells me you lost men at a place called Sandstone. Men who died for something nobody wants to acknowledge. Emily nodded. 7 good soldiers. In 1991, we lost 5. Morrison opened the journal, its pages yellowed with age. Operation Desert Storm. Our unit was tasked with reconnaissance behind Iraqi lines, looking for Scud missile sites, chemical weapons, the usual justifications for sending men to die in the desert. He turned the journal toward them. Inside were hand-drawn maps, coordinates, notes in a tight, disciplined script. What we found instead was a research facility hidden in a canyon about 30 miles from the Kuwait border. No Iraqi military presence, no national identifiers at all, just scientists, equipment, and test subjects. Emily leaned forward. American scientists? Morrison's eyes darkened with memory. Some American, some British, some whose nationality we couldn't identify, but all speaking English, all working together like colleagues. Blackburn picked up the thread. We observed for 3 days, documented everything. The facility had multiple buildings, underground components, high security. And the test subjects? Emily asked. Morrison's face hardened. Prisoners, some local, some not. They were testing weapons, not conventional, not chemical either, though that's what we initially thought. Biological, Emily said softly. Morrison studied her face. You've seen it too, haven't you? The same program, different desert. She nodded slowly. Afghanistan, 2019. They called it the Phoenix Protocol. The old soldier's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. He flipped through his journal to a page near the end, then turned it to show a single phrase circled multiple times. Phoenix Protocol. After we reported what we found, our unit was recalled immediately. No explanation. When we returned to base, we were separated, debriefed individually, told the facility was a rogue operation, terrorists, insurgents, not sanctioned by any government. Morrison closed the journal. 3 days later, an airstrike leveled the entire canyon. Nothing left but rubble. And our documentation? Classified, buried. Our mission officially redesignated as a standard reconnaissance patrol. No facility, no test subjects, no Phoenix Protocol. They gave us medals, Blackburn added bitterly. Bronze stars for a reconnaissance mission that supposedly encountered no resistance. Told us we were heroes for finding nothing. Emily's hand unconsciously moved to her pocket where the Medal of Honor rested. Same playbook, different war. Morrison stood and moved to a cabinet in the corner. He unlocked it with a key from around his neck and removed a stack of folders bound with faded red tape. I made copies, against orders, kept them all these years, knowing someday they'd matter. He placed the folders on the table between them. 5 men from my unit died within 2 years of that mission. Accidents, suicides. One just disappeared. Blackburn and I are the only ones left, and that's because we played their game. Kept quiet, appeared to believe the official story. Emily opened the top folder. Inside were photographs, grainy, taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. A facility nestled in a desert canyon. Men in lab coats, others in unmarked military fatigues. In cages, human-sized cages. This is identical to what we found at Sandstone, she whispered. Except the mountains were different. The prisoners were different. But the setup, the labs, the security protocols, exactly the same. 30 years, Morrison said. 30 years they've been running this program, moving it when necessary, changing the name perhaps, but the same research. But what exactly is the Phoenix Protocol? Blackburn asked. We never got close enough to learn the details. Emily's face was grim. We did. 2 of my men were medics. They recognized what they were seeing. She took a deep breath. They're developing biological weapons that target specific genetic markers, weapons that can be designed to kill certain ethnic groups while leaving others unaffected. The room fell silent except for the crackling of the fire. Outside, snow began to fall more heavily, the wind picking up as the promised storm arrived. Ethnic-specific bioweapons, Morrison finally said, the holy grail of targeted warfare. Theoretical for decades, but considered too complex, too unethical, even for black-budget research. Not theoretical anymore, Emily said. At Sandstone, they had reached human trials. The test subjects were showing the effects, organ failure, massive internal bleeding, but only those with specific genetic markers. Others, with different genetic backgrounds, showed no symptoms despite equal exposure. Blackburn's face had gone pale. My God. If this technology were deployed in a conflict zone, genocide without the political consequences, Morrison finished. The perfect weapon for those who want to reshape regions without the messy aftermath of conventional warfare. Emily closed the folder, her hands steady despite the horror of what they were discussing. The question is, who's behind it? Who has the authority to run a program like this across multiple wars, multiple decades? Morrison and Blackburn exchanged glances, the look of men who had carried a burden too long. We have a name, Morrison said finally. Just one, found in documents at the Iraq facility, director of the program, though likely not the ultimate authority. Harrington, Emily said. Colonel Walter Harrington. Morrison's eyebrows rose slightly. You know him. He was my commanding officer at Sandstone, the man who gave me the Medal of Honor, the man who left me this. She showed them the note. You were never supposed to come back. Harrington was a captain in '91, Blackburn said. Mid-level officer in Army intelligence. Nothing in his official record connects him to the Iraq facility. Nothing in my official record connects me to Sandstone, Emily countered. These people are experts at making inconvenient truths disappear. Morrison returned to the cabinet and removed one last item, a faded photograph in a simple frame. He handed it to Emily. The photo showed a group of men in desert camouflage, standing before a nondescript military tent. One face was circled in faded red ink. A young officer, perhaps 30, with the bearing of a man destined for higher rank. Walter Harrington, Morrison confirmed. This was taken 3 miles from the research facility, 2 days before we discovered it. He wasn't stationed anywhere near our area of operations according to official records. Emily studied the face in the photograph. Younger, less lined, but unmistakably the same man who had pinned the Medal of Honor to her uniform 2 years ago. The same man who had looked her in the eye and called her a hero while knowing he had ordered the death of her entire squad. He's more than just a participant, she said quietly. He's the connective tissue. Iraq to Afghanistan. 30 years of the same program, with the same man advancing through the ranks alongside it. The question is, who's above him, Blackburn said. A program this classified, this morally questionable, needs protection from the highest levels. Emily looked up from the photograph, her eyes hard with resolve. There's only one way to find out. We need to confront Harrington directly. Morrison barked a laugh, harsh and without humor. The man surrounded by private security, protected by layers of classification and powerful friends. You can't just walk up and demand answers. No, Emily agreed, but I have something you didn't have in '91. She pulled the Medal of Honor from her pocket, the gold catching the firelight. I have his signature on my citation, his personal guarantee of my heroism. And I have the one thing men like Harrington fear most. Which is, Morrison asked, a story the American people would actually care about, not some complex international conspiracy, not shadowy agencies or contractors, but a simple, devastating truth. American soldiers were left to die to protect a program developing weapons that violate every international law and human rights convention we claim to uphold. The three fell silent, each lost in thought as the fire crackled and the wind outside grew stronger, rattling the windows of the isolated cabin. There's someone else you should talk to, Morrison finally said. Someone who might know more about the current iteration of the program. Emily looked up. Who? Sarah Winters, former Army nurse, served at the field hospital near Sandstone in 2019. Now works at Fairbanks Memorial. She treated soldiers with unusual symptoms, soldiers who later disappeared from the hospital without explanation. Blackburn checked his watch. It's nearly 1,600 hours. If we leave now, we can reach the hospital before end of shift. As they prepared to depart, Morrison placed a hand on Emily's arm. His touch was light, but there was strength still in those weathered fingers. 30 years I've carried this burden. he said quietly. Watched good men die for asking questions. Lived with the knowledge that something monstrous was being done in the name of national security. His pale eyes held hers. Don't underestimate these people, Sergeant. They've had decades to perfect the art of making problems disappear. Emily covered his hand with her own. With respect, Master Sergeant, they've never had a problem like me. Fairbanks Memorial Hospital rose like a fortress of light against the gathering darkness of the winter afternoon. Snow swirled around the building, driven by winds that had strengthened during their drive from Morrison's cabin. Inside, the harsh fluorescent lighting and antiseptic smell created the familiar institutional atmosphere of hospitals worldwide. Blackburn approached the information desk, his military bearings softened to appear less official. We're looking for Sarah Winters, nursing staff. The receptionist, young, blonde, with the weary expression of someone nearing the end of a long shift, tapped at her computer. Ms. Winters is in the long-term care unit, 5th floor, but visiting hours are almost over. It's important, Emily said, stepping forward. Please, just a few minutes. Something in her tone must have conveyed the urgency because the receptionist nodded. 5th floor, take the elevators to your right. The long-term care unit was quieter than the main hospital, the lighting softer, the pace less frantic. A nurse's station stood at the center of the floor, staffed by 2 women in scrubs. The older of the 2 looked up as they approached. Gray hair pulled back in a practical bun, lines of experience etched around kind eyes. Her name badge read S. Winters, RN. Sarah Winters? Blackburn asked. She studied them, recognition slowly dawning in her eyes as she took in their military bearing. Captain Blackburn, Fort Richardson. It wasn't a question. We need to talk, privately. Sarah glanced at her colleague, then nodded toward a small consultation room down the hall. 10 minutes, that's all I can spare. Once the door closed behind them, Sarah's professional demeanor shifted subtly, shoulders tensing, eyes more alert. The posture of someone who knew trouble when it walked through the door. This is about Sandstone, she said directly. Isn't it? Emily stepped forward. You remember it? Hard to forget the worst 3 months of my nursing career. Sarah's gaze shifted to Emily, studying her more carefully. You were there, one of the survivors they brought in that night. April 2019. Emily nodded. Sergeant Emily Shepard. Recognition flashed in Sarah's eyes. They said you were the hero, the one who saved the others during the helicopter crash. Her voice held a note of skepticism. There was no crash, Emily said quietly. That was the cover story. Sarah Winters sank into one of the chairs, suddenly looking every one of her 65 years. I knew it. The injuries, they weren't consistent with a crash. The burns weren't thermal. The hemorrhaging wasn't from trauma. What exactly did you see? Blackburn asked, sitting across from her. Sarah's hands twisted together in her lap. I was senior nurse in the trauma unit at the field hospital. That night, they brought in 3 soldiers, 2 men and her. She nodded toward Emily. The men were dying, multiple organ failure, bleeding from every orifice, skin lesions unlike anything I'd ever seen. And me? Emily asked. Concussion, gunshot wound to the shoulder, conventional injuries. Sarah's brow furrowed. I always wondered why you were different, why you weren't sick like the others. Emily's jaw tightened. Because I wasn't exposed. I was outside the facility when my team encountered the bioagent. Sarah nodded slowly, pieces falling into place. The 2 men died within hours. Despite everything we tried, their bodies just shut down. And then the strangest thing happened. A medical team arrived from outside our hospital, officials I'd never seen before. They took the bodies, all our samples, all our notes and records, told us the incident was classified at the highest level. And no one questioned this? Blackburn asked. A bitter smile crossed Sarah's face. Captain, you know how it works in a war zone. Orders come down, you follow them. Ask questions. You find yourself reassigned to the worst posting the military can find. Was there anyone else? Emily pressed. Any other patients with similar symptoms? Sarah's eyes clouded with memory. One a week earlier, local contractor who worked at Sandstone. Same symptoms, began with nosebleeds, progressed to total organ failure within hours. Before he died, he was delirious, saying they were testing something on the prisoners. something that only killed certain bloodlines. The three sat in silence for a moment, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, the occasional announcement echoing from the hospital PA system. "There's something else," Sarah finally said. "Something I've never told anyone." She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small USB drive. The medical team that came for the bodies, they were thorough, but they didn't know about my personal backup files. Emily took the drive, her hand steady despite the potential significance of what she was holding. "It's not much," Sarah continued. "Just my notes, blood work results, photographs of the lesions. But it's evidence that whatever killed those men wasn't any natural disease or conventional injury." "This could be crucial," Emily said, pocketing the drive. "Thank you." Sarah studied her with the experienced gaze of a nurse who had spent decades assessing people in crisis. "What are you planning to do with this information?" "Find the truth, expose it. Make sure the men who died at Sandstone and in Iraq in 1991 didn't die for nothing." "And you think that's possible? Against the kind of people who can make bodies, records, and entire facilities disappear?" Emily's eyes hardened with determination. "They gave me this." She showed Sarah the Medal of Honor. "Their biggest mistake was trying to make me a hero instead of burying me with the others. Now I'm going to use their lie to expose their truth." Sarah's pager beeped. She checked it and stood. "I have to get back. Patient emergency." She moved to the door, then paused, looking back at Emily. "Those men, the ones who died that night, before the end, one of them regained consciousness briefly, asked me to deliver a message if I ever met his sergeant again." Emily's breath caught. "What message?" "He said, 'Tell her Keystone has the answers.' Does that mean anything to you?" Emily and Blackburn exchanged glances. "Keystone," Emily repeated. "Not a what, a who. Private Michael Chen. We called him Keystone because he was from Pennsylvania. He was our communications specialist." "And he wasn't with you that night?" Sarah asked. "No, he was back at base, monitoring our comms." Emily's mind raced. If he knew something, if he had evidence, then he might have hidden it, Blackburn finished. "Somewhere at Sandstone." "A base that officially no longer exists," Emily reminded him. Sarah opened the door. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Sergeant. Those men deserve justice. And whatever was happening at Sandstone needs to be brought into the light." As Sarah left, Emily turned to Blackburn. "We need to get back to Richardson. If Chen left something, some evidence, we need to find someone who might know where to look." Blackburn nodded grimly. "And we need to move fast. If Harrington knows you're asking questions, connecting with people like Morrison and Winters, he won't wait long to act." They moved toward the elevators, their footsteps echoing in the quiet hospital corridor. As the doors opened, Emily caught a glimpse of movement at the far end of the hall, a figure turning quickly away, disappearing around a corner. Male, military bearing. "We're being watched," she said quietly. Blackburn didn't turn. "I know. Since we left Morrison's cabin. Black SUV, 2 vehicles back." "How do you want to handle it?" "Let them follow, for now." The elevator doors closed. "It tells us one thing for certain." "What's that?" Blackburn's weathered face was grim in the elevator's harsh light. "We're getting close to something they don't want found." The drive back to Fort Richardson was tense, both of them watching for the black SUV that maintained its distance behind them. The storm had intensified, snow falling in thick sheets that the wipers struggled to clear. Visibility was down to less than 50 yards. "Perfect conditions for an accident," Blackburn commented, his eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. "Remote road, bad weather, no witnesses." Emily checked her sidearm, a Beretta M9, standard military issue. "Let them try." "What's our next move? We can't go back to Richardson, not with our shadow back there." Emily thought for a moment. "We need to find out what Chen knew, what evidence he might have hidden." "And how do we do that?" "His family, he was close to his sister, called her every week from Sandstone. If he suspected something, if he was worried, he might have told her." Blackburn considered this. "Chen, from Pennsylvania, Philadelphia?" "Harrisburg. His sister teaches at the university there." "That's a long way from Alaska, Shepherd." Emily's expression was resolute. "Then we better start making arrangements." As they rounded a curve in the highway, headlights suddenly appeared ahead, multiple vehicles blocking the road. Military Humvees, Men in winter gear, weapons visible even through the falling snow. Blackburn slowed, his hands tight on the wheel. Roadblock. Emily scanned the situation rapidly. This isn't standard military. No markings, no lights. Same players from the training exercise. Blackburn's voice was calm, the steadiness of a veteran who had faced danger many times before. We're outgunned, Shepard. At least 8 men. Heavy weapons. Options? He nodded toward a narrow forest road just ahead, almost invisible in the swirling snow. Service road. Runs parallel to the highway for about 10 miles. Rough terrain, but the Humvee can handle it. Do it. Blackburn waited until they were almost at the roadblock, then spun the wheel hard, the Humvee fishtailing as it left the highway and plunged onto the narrow forest road. Behind them, shouts of alarm, headlights swinging around. The pursuit beginning. The service road was barely maintained, a rough track through dense pine forest. Snow had drifted in places, creating obstacles that Blackburn navigated with the skill of a man who had driven in combat zones across multiple continents. The Humvee bounced and slid, but kept moving forward. They'll catch up, Emily said, watching out the rear window as headlights appeared behind them. This road only goes one direction. Not exactly. Blackburn's eyes were fixed ahead, searching. There's an old logging camp about 5 miles in. Multiple tracks branch off there. Used to run training exercises here years back. The Humvee crashed through the underbrush, branches scraping against the sides like desperate fingers. The pursuing vehicles were gaining, larger, more powerful, with drivers equally determined. Almost there, Blackburn muttered. Should see the camp after this next. A massive jolt rocked the vehicle as something struck them from behind. One of the pursuit vehicles had caught up, ramming them deliberately. The Humvee slewed sideways, tires fighting for traction on the snow-covered ground. Hold on! Blackburn fought the wheel, muscles straining. Another impact, harder this time. The Humvee's rear tires left the ground momentarily, then crashed back down. A third hit sent them spinning, the world outside becoming a disorienting blur of trees and snow and darkness. When they stopped, it was against the unyielding trunk of a massive pine. Steam hissed from the crumpled hood. The windshield was a spiderweb of cracks. Outside, headlights approached, cutting through the swirling snow like searchlights. You okay? Blackburn asked, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. Emily nodded, already reaching for her weapon. We need to move. Now. They exited on the side away from the approaching vehicles, the deep snow immediately engulfing them to mid-calf. The cold was savage, the kind that froze exposed skin in minutes. They crouched behind the Humvee as the first of the pursuit vehicles pulled up, its headlights illuminating the wreckage. The trees, Blackburn whispered. Our only chance, Washington. Emily nodded, calculating angles, timing. Their fleeting opportunity as men emerged from the vehicles, weapons raised. 3, Blackburn counted down. 2, 1. They broke cover simultaneously, sprinting for the darkness beyond the headlights' reach. Behind them, shouts. Then gunfire. Not the pop of warning shots, but the sustained bursts of men shooting to kill. The forest swallowed them, the dense pines providing cover as they ran. Snow hampered their movement, each step requiring extra effort, extra energy. But years of military training had prepared them both for exactly this kind of situation, moving rapidly through hostile territory, using terrain to their advantage. The pursuit was disorganized initially, the attackers spreading out to search rather than moving as a coordinated unit. Emily and Blackburn used this to their advantage, changing direction frequently, using trees as cover, minimizing their footprints where possible. After 20 minutes of hard movement, they paused in a small clearing, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Lost them for now, Blackburn said, his voice low. But they'll have night vision, thermal imaging, standard equipment for Black Ops teams. Emily nodded, conserving her breath. The logging camp? Half a mile north, abandoned in the 90s. Building still standing last time I was there. Shelter, defensible position, better than freezing in the open. And they moved more cautiously now, aware that speed had to be balanced against the trail they were leaving. The storm worked in their favor, fresh snow gradually filling their footprints, the wind obscuring sounds of movement. The logging camp appeared through the trees like a ghost from another era, a collection of weathered wooden buildings arranged around what had once been a central yard. Snow had drifted against the walls, piled on the sagging roofs. Windows were dark, empty sockets. The largest structure, presumably the main lodge, stood at the far end, its door hanging crookedly from rusted hinges. They approached carefully, alert for any sign the pursuers had anticipated their destination. The camp appeared deserted, the only movement the swirling snow driven by the relentless wind. The main lodge interior was dark and musty, the air heavy with the scent of old wood and abandoned spaces. Blackburn used a small tactical flashlight, keeping the beam pointed downward to minimize the chance of it being seen from outside. The room they entered had once been a common area, long tables still in place, a massive stone fireplace dominating one wall. "No fire," Emily said unnecessarily. "Smoke would give us away immediately." Blackburn nodded, moving deeper into the building. "Storeroom in the back should still have emergency supplies. Standard procedure for these remote sites." The storeroom was small but organized, shelves still stocked with the basics of wilderness survival: first aid kits, emergency blankets, chemical heat packs, some canned food long past its expiration date. They took what was useful, particularly the heat packs that would help ward off the deadly cold without revealing their position. Back in the main room, they established a defensive position with clear sight lines to all entrances. The temperature inside was only marginally better than outside, but at least they were sheltered from the wind and snow. As they activated heat packs and wrapped themselves in the reflective emergency blankets, Emily finally asked the question that had been hovering between them since the roadblock. "Who were they, Captain?" "Not regular military, not local law enforcement." Blackburn's face was grim in the dim light. "Same unit that was at the training exercise yesterday, probably the same that ambushed your team at Sandstone. Black operations, deniable assets, the kind of men who don't exist on any official roster." "Working for Harrington?" "Working for whoever Harrington works for. A colonel, even a retired one, doesn't have the authority to deploy armed teams on U.S. soil. This goes higher." Emily pulled the Medal of Honor from her pocket, studying it in the faint light. The irony wasn't lost on her. America's highest military decoration, awarded for valor, courage, self-sacrifice. Yet in her case, it represented the opposite: a conspiracy, a cover-up, an attempt to buy her silence with glory. "I never wanted this," she said quietly. "Never asked for recognition. All I wanted was the truth. Justice for my men." Blackburn studied her across the darkened room. "And now?" "Now I want more than justice. I want exposure. I want everyone involved, from the scientists who developed these weapons to the generals and politicians who authorized them. I want them all held accountable." "That kind of accountability rarely happens, Shepard. Not at those levels." "Then I'll settle for destroying the program itself, making sure no more soldiers die protecting America's dirty secrets." Outside, the wind howled around the abandoned building, finding every crack and crevice, whispering like restless ghosts. The temperature continued to drop as full night descended on the Alaskan wilderness. "We need to keep moving," Blackburn said after an hour. "Stay in one place too long, we become easy targets." "Where? The storm's getting worse. We're miles from any road." "There's an old hunting cabin about 2 miles west. More isolated, better defensive position. If we can reach it before this storm peaks, we might have a chance to regroup, plan our next move." Emily nodded, gathering the supplies they'd salvaged. "The men who were following us, they've called for backup by now. Probably aerial support once the weather clears. All the more reason to be somewhere else when that happens." They stepped back into the storm, the cold immediately assaulting them with renewed ferocity. The wind had strengthened, driving snow horizontally, reducing visibility to mere feet. They moved slowly, Blackburn leading the way, navigating by memory and occasional glimpses of landmarks through the swirling white. The attack came without warning. A figure lunged from behind a snow-laden pine, tackling Emily to the ground. The snow cushioned her fall, but the impact still drove the breath from her lungs. She reacted instinctively, years of combat training taking over. A sharp elbow strike, a twist of her body, fighting to gain the upper hand against an opponent she couldn't clearly see in the darkness and swirling snow. Her attacker was strong, skilled, military training evident in his movements. They grappled in the snow, each fighting for control. Emily felt a hand close around her throat, squeezing with deadly intent. She drove her knee upward, connecting solidly. The grip loosened enough for her to break free, rolling away, reaching for her sidearm. But the attacker was faster. A boot stomped on her wrist, pinning her gun hand to the ground. The pressure was enormous, bones grinding together. Through the pain, she looked up, finally seeing her assailant's face in a brief moment when the snow parted. Sergeant Reynolds, his shoulder bandaged beneath his winter gear, his face twisted with hatred and something else. Fear. "You should have stayed dead, Shepard," he snarled, drawing his own weapon and aiming it at her head. "Some secrets are worth killing for." A shot rang out, shockingly loud even against the howling wind. Reynolds staggered, confusion replacing the hatred on his face. He looked down at the spreading dark stain on his chest, then back at Emily with something like surprise. As he collapsed to the snow beside her, Emily saw Blackburn approaching. His sidearm still raised, expression grim but resolute. "You okay?" he asked, helping her to her feet. She nodded, massaging her wrist. "He was waiting for us. They knew we'd come this way." Blackburn knelt beside Reynolds, checking for a pulse. Finding none, he searched the body methodically, removing weapons, communication devices, anything useful. "We need to move," he said, standing. "That shot will bring the others." "Wait." Emily knelt beside Reynolds' body, searching more carefully through his pockets. In an inner pocket of his jacket, she found what she was looking for, a small notebook, its pages protected by a waterproof cover. She flipped it open, angling the pages toward Blackburn's tactical light. Inside were names, dates, coordinates, and one phrase underlined multiple times: Phoenix Protocol, Phase 3. "He was part of it," Emily said, tucking the notebook into her own pocket. "From the beginning. That's why he was so hostile when I arrived. He knew who I was, what I might know." "And now we know more than we did before," Blackburn replied. "Come on. We've got a long way to go, and this storm isn't letting up." They left Reynolds' body in the snow, the white already beginning to cover him like a shroud. The Alaskan wilderness would claim him, as it had claimed so many others who underestimated its lethal indifference. Emily and Blackburn moved westward, fighting the storm with each step, carrying with them evidence of a conspiracy that spanned decades and continents. A conspiracy that had already claimed too many lives and would claim more before the truth was finally exposed. Behind them, the darkness and the storm concealed their tracks. Ahead, somewhere in the white emptiness, lay answers, and perhaps, finally, justice. For Emily Shepard, for the 7 men who died at Sandstone, and for all those who had been sacrificed in the name of the Phoenix Protocol. Dawn broke reluctantly over the Alaskan wilderness, the sun a pale suggestion behind heavy clouds. The storm had passed during the night, leaving behind a transformed landscape, pristine, silent, deadly in its beauty. Trees stood burdened with fresh snow, branches bowing under the weight. The world had been erased and redrawn in perfect white. In the hunting cabin, little more than a one-room shelter with a small wood stove, Emily Shepard stood at the frost-covered window, watching for movement across the unbroken expanse of snow. Behind her, Captain Blackburn slept fitfully on a narrow cot, his body finally surrendering to exhaustion after their grueling 18-hour ordeal. They had reached the cabin well after midnight, half frozen despite their military cold-weather gear. The temperature had dropped to 30 below, the kind of cold that doesn't just threaten, but promises death to the unprepared. Inside, they had found basic supplies: firewood, matches, a few canned goods left by hunters or rangers. Enough to survive, if not comfortably. Emily's breath fogged the glass as she scanned the tree line. No signs of pursuit yet, but she harbored no illusions. They would come. Men like the ones who had ambushed them didn't simply give up. They would have found Reynolds' body by now, would be tracking them methodically, professionally. She turned from the window, her gaze falling on the small collection of items arranged on the cabin's rough wooden table. Reynolds' notebook, Sarah Winter's USB drive, Morrison's photographs from Iraq, the Medal of Honor, pieces of a puzzle spanning decades, continents, and too many dead. Blackburn stirred, his eyes opening with the immediate alertness of a soldier who had spent years in combat zones. No gradual waking, no moment of confusion. Just sleep, then full awareness. "Anything?" he asked, voice rough from cold and fatigue. Nothing yet, but they're coming. He nodded, sitting up with a grimace. The decades in uniform had left their mark, old injuries protesting in the cold, the wear of too many missions and too few periods of true rest. We need to move, he said. They'll have thermal imaging, aerial support now that the storm's cleared. Emily gestured to the items on the table. First, we need to understand what we have. Reynolds' notebook mentions Phase 3 of the Phoenix Protocol. Morrison's evidence confirms the program existed in 1991. Sarah's medical data proves it was active at Sandstone in 2019. But we're still missing the core. What exactly is this weapon they're developing, and who authorized it? Blackburn moved to the wood stove, adding a small log to maintain the precious heat. The answers aren't in Alaska, Shepard. We need to get to Harrisburg, find Chen's sister, and we need to confront Harrington. Harrington is surrounded by security at Meridian Defense. We can't just walk in and demand answers. A grim smile crossed Blackburn's weathered face. No, but I know someone who can get us close. Someone who owes me from Baghdad, 2007. Emily raised an eyebrow. Another ghost from your past? Former Delta, now works private security, ironically for Meridian. Man named Connor Sullivan. Lost his entire team in an ambush. Bad intelligence. I got him out, kept it quiet when he needed time to heal, instead of being shipped straight back to the fight. And you think he'll risk his career to help us? I think he's got the same sense of loyalty to truth that you and I do. Blackburn checked his watch. We need to reach civilization, find secure communications. Fort Richardson is compromised. Reynolds proves that. We need to go somewhere unexpected. Emily considered their options. Limited resources, no vehicle, hostile forces hunting them. And they were in one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth. An Aktuvuk Pass, she said finally. Small village about 30 miles northwest, indigenous community, minimal military presence. I trained with their hunters last year, Arctic survival course. People there know me, might help us. Blackburn nodded approval. 30 miles in these conditions. Challenging but doable. 2 days hard travel if we push it. Unless our friends find us first. Emily began gathering their meager supplies. We should leave now, use the daylight hours. As Blackburn prepared to depart, Emily took one last look at the Medal of Honor on the table. After a moment's hesitation, she picked it up and slipped it into her pocket. Not from pride or sentiment, but because it had become something else now. Evidence, ammunition, a key that might unlock doors otherwise closed to them. They stepped outside into the crystalline morning, the cold immediately assaulting exposed skin with vicious intensity. The snow was deep, past their knees in places, making each step an effort. But both were experienced in Arctic conditions, knowing how to conserve energy, how to maintain a pace that could be sustained for hours. Stay along the tree line, Blackburn advised. Better cover, ground might be more stable. They moved in silence, two figures diminishing against the vast white landscape, leaving a trail that told the story of their passage to anyone who knew how to read it. 5 miles from the hunting cabin, hidden in a stand of pines, a man watched through high-powered binoculars as Emily and Blackburn made their way northwest. Staff Sergeant Elaine Harper, her true identity now revealed, lowered the binoculars and spoke quietly into a satellite phone. Targets moving northwest from the Johnson Creek cabin, heading toward Anaktuvuk Pass, most likely. Reynolds is down, no sign of the intelligence package. The voice that responded was male, authoritative, carrying the weight of decades of command. Colonel Walter Harrington. Can you intercept? Negative. Limited resources, challenging terrain. Better to let them reach the village than take them in a controlled environment. A pause on the line. The information they have gathered, it could compromise the entire program. 30 years of work. Phase 3 trials are scheduled to begin next month. Understood, sir, but a botched field operation creates more problems than it solves. Better to wait, do this cleanly. Another pause. Very well, monitor only. Extraction team will meet you at Anaktuvuk. Remember, Shepard is the priority target. She's seen the facility, knows the program parameters. Blackburn is secondary, limited knowledge but dangerous due to his Iraq connection. And the intel? Secure if possible, destroy if necessary. Nothing can be allowed to reach the public. The Phoenix Protocol remains classified at the highest level. Understood, sir. Harper ended the call, returning the binoculars to her eyes. Through them, she watched Emily and Blackburn's steady progress. Two soldiers fighting not just the elements now, but a system designed to eliminate threats to national security by any means necessary. Harper had been placed at Fort Richardson 3 years earlier, tasked with monitoring potential security breaches related to the Sandstone operation. When Emily arrived with her Medal of Honor and her quiet determination, Harper had been ordered to watch, report, but not engage directly. Now the situation had escalated beyond containment. Shepard had connected with Morrison, with Winters, had recovered Reynolds' notebook. The carefully constructed walls around the Phoenix Protocol were beginning to crack. Harper adjusted her position, settling in for a long surveillance operation. She had served her country for 20 years, following orders without question, believing in the mission. But lately doubt had begun to creep in. Questions about what exactly she was protecting, about whether some secrets deserved to remain buried. She pushed these thoughts aside. Her job was not to question but to execute. And right now, that meant tracking two fugitives across the Alaskan wilderness, leading the extraction team to their location, and ensuring that America's darkest military program remained in the shadows where it belonged, or did it? By midday, Emily and Blackburn had covered nearly 10 miles, the exertion keeping them warm despite the Arctic temperature. They moved efficiently, conserving energy where possible, helping each other through particularly challenging terrain. During a brief rest in the shelter of an overhanging rock formation, Blackburn produced a small satellite phone, military issue, but with the tracking features disabled. Standard precaution, he explained at Emily's questioning look. Always keep one that can't be tracked. Learned that in Baghdad. He dialed a number from memory, waited as it connected, then spoke in a low voice. Sullivan, it's Blackburn. A pause. Yeah, I know it's been a while. Listen, I'm calling in that favor from '07. Another pause. Need access to Meridian, specifically to Harrington. He listened for a long moment. Understood. We'll be there. And Sullivan, this is about American soldiers who died for the wrong reasons, like your team in Baghdad. He ended the call, tucking the phone back into his parka. Sullivan will help. Says Harrington is scheduled to speak at a defense contractor conference in D.C. next week. Limited security compared to Meridian headquarters. Our best chance to confront him directly. D.C. is a long way from Alaska, Emily observed. We'll get there. First, Inaktuvuk, then Fairbanks. From there, commercial flight to Seattle, then east. Assuming we're not arrested, killed, or disappeared first. Blackburn's expression was grim. There's that. They resumed their journey, the winter sun already beginning its early descent toward the horizon. In Alaska in January, daylight was a brief visitor, darkness the constant companion. They needed to cover as much ground as possible before night fell again. The landscape gradually changed as they moved northwest, the terrain becoming more rugged, the forest thinning. They were entering the foothills of the Brooks Range, the vast mountain chain that separated Alaska's interior from its northern reaches. As the sun touched the horizon, painting the snow in shades of gold and rose, Emily paused on a ridge overlooking a vast valley. In the distance, smoke rose from what appeared to be a small encampment, 3 or 4 cabins clustered together. Not Inaktuvuk, she said. Too small. Might be a hunting camp. Athabascan, maybe. Blackburn studied the smoke through binoculars. Occupied. Recent tracks around the perimeter. Options? We need shelter for the night. Temperatures dropping fast. If they're hunters, they might help, especially if they know you from your training. Emily nodded. Worth the risk. Let's approach openly. No skulking. These people know their land. They've probably been aware of us for the past hour. They descended into the valley as the last light faded from the sky, the temperature plummeting with the sun's departure. By the time they reached the small cluster of cabins, stars had appeared, brilliant points of light in the vast Arctic darkness. As they approached, a door opened in the largest cabin. A figure emerged, tall, broad-shouldered, rifle held casually but ready. Native Alaskan, perhaps 60, with a face lined by decades of Arctic living. That's close enough, he called, his voice carrying in the still, cold air. Emily and Blackburn stopped, keeping their hands visible. "We're not looking for trouble," Emily called back. "Just shelter for the night, willing to trade or work for it." The man studied them, his eyes missing nothing. Their military bearing, their exhaustion, the wariness that spoke of pursuit. "You're the army woman," he said finally. "The one who trained with Thomas last winter." "Survival course," Emily nodded. "Sergeant Emily Shepard. This is Captain Blackburn from Fort Richardson." The man lowered his rifle slightly. "Thomas said you were a good student, respectful, listened more than you talked." He gestured toward the cabin. "I'm Joseph Nashek. Come in before you freeze. Questions can wait until you're warm." The cabin interior was simple but comfortable. A large room with a wood stove dominating one wall, handmade furniture, pelts and woven blankets adding color and warmth. Three other people were inside. An older woman, presumably Joseph's wife, a young man in his 20s, and a girl of perhaps 16. "My wife Anna," Joseph introduced them. "My son, David. My granddaughter, Kara." Introductions made, Anna insisted they eat first. A thick stew of caribou meat and root vegetables, served with dark bread. The warmth of the cabin and the hot food began to restore them, thawing the deep cold that had settled into their bones during the long day's march. Only when they had eaten did Joseph ask the question that had clearly been on his mind since their arrival. "You're running from something. Military doesn't send its people out in this weather without equipment, transportation." Emily exchanged glances with Blackburn, a silent communication passing between them. How much to reveal? How much to risk? "We discovered something," she said finally. "Something certain people want to keep hidden. American soldiers died because of it. We're trying to find the truth, bring it to light." Joseph nodded slowly, unsurprised. "Government secrets. Not the first time those have caused trouble on our lands." "We need to reach Anaktuvuk Pass," Blackburn added. "From there, Fairbanks, we can pay for guides, transportation if you can help arrange it." Joseph was silent for a moment, his weathered face thoughtful. "People are looking for you?" "Yes." "Military?" "Some of them, others. We're not sure exactly who they work for." The older man nodded again, as if this confirmed something he had already suspected. "David will take you to Anaktuvuk tomorrow. We have snowmobiles. Can be there by midday if the weather holds." "We can pay," Blackburn began. Joseph held up a hand, stopping him. "Not necessary. We know about secrets kept from our people. Know about experiments, things done in the name of national security." His eyes held a deep knowledge, a history of injustices witnessed and endured. "If you're fighting that system, you have our help." Later, as the others slept, Emily sat by the wood stove, watching the flames dance behind the iron grate. Sleep eluded her, too many thoughts crowding her mind. The 7 men who had died at Sandstone, the facility in Iraq 30 years earlier, the decades of secrecy, of research into weapons that violated every international convention, every principle of warfare. Joseph joined her, settling into a chair with the quiet movements of a man accustomed to the rhythms of the wilderness. "The burden you carry," he said after a while. "It's heavy." Emily nodded, not surprised that he had seen through her military composure to the weight beneath. "My grandfather was a code talker in World War II," Joseph continued. "Navajo used our language to transmit messages the Japanese couldn't decode, helped win the war. When he came home, the government swore him to secrecy, couldn't talk about what he'd done, how he'd served. Not until decades later. He prodded the fire with a poker, sending sparks dancing upward. Secrets have power, but truth has more. My grandfather lived long enough to see his service recognized, his story told. Many didn't. The men who died at Sandstone," Emily said quietly, "they deserve to have their story told too. Then you must tell it, no matter the cost." They sat in companionable silence after that, 2 warriors from different generations, different cultures, united by an understanding of sacrifice and duty that transcended both. The snowmobiles cut across the pristine landscape like mechanical predators, their engines shattering the Arctic silence. David Nashek led the way, his knowledge of the terrain evident in the confident line he carved through the snow. Emily rode behind him with Blackburn on the second machine. The day was clear, the sky an impossible blue vault overhead. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks gleaming white against the azure backdrop. Under different circumstances, the journey might have been exhilarating, even beautiful. But beauty was a luxury neither Emily nor Blackburn could afford. Both remained vigilant, scanning the horizon, alert for signs of pursuit. The exposed terrain offered speed but also vulnerability. They were visible for miles in any direction. By midday, as Joseph had predicted, the small settlement of Anaktuvuk Pass came into view, a cluster of buildings nestled in a valley between mountains. One of the most remote communities in America, accessible only by air for much of the year. A place where everyone knew everyone else, where strangers were immediately noticed. "Better if I don't go into the village with you," David said, as they stopped on a ridge overlooking the settlement. "Less questions that way." "We understand," Blackburn replied. "You've done more than enough." David pointed toward a building on the settlement's edge. "Thomas lives there. The man who trained with you," he added to Emily. "He'll help you arrange transport to Fairbanks, regular flights, weather permitting." After David departed, Emily and Blackburn walked the remaining distance to the village. Their arrival was noticed immediately. Curious eyes watching from windows, children pausing in their play to stare at the newcomers. Thomas, a compact, muscular man in his 40s, recognized Emily instantly. His welcome was warm but cautious, the natural wariness of a man who lived on the frontier. "Sergeant Shepard, unexpected to see you here." "It's a long story, Thomas, one I'd rather tell inside." He nodded, ushering them into a small but well-maintained home. Once in all, they explained their situation. Not everything, but enough. Thomas listened without interruption, his expression growing more serious as they spoke. "I can arrange seats on tomorrow's flight to Fairbanks," he said when they finished. "Small plane. Pilot is a friend, won't ask questions." "We appreciate it," Blackburn said. "And we need one more thing, secure communications. Military channels are compromised." Thomas considered this. "Village has satellite internet, not fast but reliable. Computer in the community center. I can get you access, privacy for an hour or so." That afternoon, in the small room that served as Anaktuvuk Pass's administrative office, Emily connected Sarah Winter's USB drive to an aging desktop computer. The files opened slowly, medical records, blood test results, photographs of the horrific lesions that had covered the dying soldiers' bodies. "This confirms what we suspected," she said quietly to Blackburn, who stood guard at the door. "The bioagent targets specific genetic markers. These men died because their DNA matched the weapon's profile. And you survived because yours didn't," Blackburn concluded. "Not heroism, not luck, simple genetics." Emily nodded, downloading the files to a secure cloud server Morrison had provided, one final precaution in case they were captured or killed before reaching Washington. Next, they examined Reynolds' notebook more carefully. Most entries were in a personal shorthand, difficult to decipher. But certain phrases stood out. Phase 3 trials scheduled February 2022. Test subjects selected from population groups A, B, C. Projected casualty rates, 97.8% in targeted groups, 0.3% in non-targeted. "They're planning actual deployment," Blackburn said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Not just development, not just testing. Use in the field." "Next month," Emily added. "We're running out of time." As she closed the notebook, a loose photograph fell from between its pages. A group shot, military personnel in desert camouflage. Iraq, based on the background. And in the center, unmistakable despite the decades that had passed, stood Colonel Walter Harrington. Beside him, a figure that made Blackburn inhale sharply. "You recognize someone?" Emily asked. The man next to Harrington, General Richard Compton, chairman of the Joint Chiefs from 2003 to 2007, one of the architects of the Iraq War strategy. Emily studied the photograph more closely. This was taken in '91 during Desert Storm. Compton would have been what? A colonel then? Probably. Fast-tracked through the ranks afterward. Blackburn's expression was troubled. If Compton was involved in the Phoenix Protocol from the beginning, then the program has protection at the highest levels of the military, Emily finished, past and present. The implications were staggering. Not just a rogue operation or a black budget project, but a sanctioned program with backing from the Pentagon's most senior leadership. A weapon being developed not despite international conventions, but with the full knowledge and approval of those charged with upholding those very conventions. We need more, Blackburn said finally. This connects Harrington and Compton to the Iraq facility in '91. But we need evidence linking them directly to Sandstone, to what's happening now. That's why we need to get to Harrodsburg. Find Chen's sister. See what he might have told her, what evidence he might have left behind. As they prepared to leave the community center, Thomas appeared in the doorway, his expression grave. Helicopter landed at the north end of the village 10 minutes ago. Military, 4 men armed, asking questions, looking for 2 soldiers. Emily and Blackburn exchanged glances. Their pursuers had found them more quickly than anticipated. Is there another way out? Emily asked. Thomas nodded. Back door leads to the storage shed. From there, you can reach the trees without being seen from the main street. Our flight to Fairbanks? Not until tomorrow morning. You'll need to hide until then. Blackburn gathered their meager belongings. Any suggestions? Old mining cabin, 2 miles east, abandoned but solid, stocked with emergency supplies. Thomas handed them a crude map. I'll tell them you passed through yesterday, headed north. Buy you some time. Emily grasped his arm. Thank you. We won't forget this. Thomas's smile was grim. Make sure whatever you're fighting for is worth it. These people don't give up easily. It's worth it, she assured him. 7 good men died for it already. Maybe more, if we don't succeed. They slipped out the back door as Thomas had directed, moving quickly through the village's outskirts toward the tree line. Behind them, voices carried on the cold, still air, men asking questions, descriptions being given, the methodical process of hunters closing in on their prey. The old mining cabin was exactly where Thomas had indicated, a sturdy log structure partially recessed into a hillside, its entrance nearly hidden by drifted snow. Inside was basic but sufficient, a wood stove, bunks, shelves stocked with canned food and other necessities. As night fell, they took turns keeping watch, alert for any sign their hideout had been discovered. Through the cabin's single window, the northern lights began to dance across the sky, curtains of green and purple light shimmering against the darkness. Nature's reminder that beauty persisted even in the harshest environments, even in the darkest times. During her watch, Emily removed the Medal of Honor from her pocket, studying it in the faint light of a single candle. The irony wasn't lost on her. The nation's highest military decoration, awarded for gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of one's life above and beyond the call of duty, given to her not for heroism but as hush money, a bribe disguised as an honor. What are you thinking? Blackburn asked quietly from his bunk. She hadn't realized he was awake. About what this really means, she replied, holding up the medal. About how symbols can be corrupted when the system behind them is corrupt. Blackburn sat up, his face half in shadow. The medal isn't corrupt, Shepard. The ideal it represents is still true, still worth fighting for. It's the men who used it as a tool who are corrupt. Does the distinction matter? 7 men died. Their families were told lies. I was given this to keep silent about crimes against humanity. Her voice was steady, but beneath it ran a current of tightly controlled anger. The whole system is complicit. Not the whole system, not every soldier, not every leader. Blackburn's voice carried the weight of his decades of service. There are still good people trying to do the right thing within that system. People like Morrison, like Sullivan, like you. Emily was silent for a long moment. When this is over, if we survive, I'm returning this medal. I don't want recognition built on lies. When this is over, Blackburn said, you'll have earned it for real. Not for the fiction they created, but for having the courage to expose the truth no matter the cost. The conversation faded into silence, both lost in their thoughts as the northern lights continued their ancient dance across the Arctic sky. The flight to Fairbanks departed at dawn, a small 8-seat plane that bounced and shuddered in the turbulent winter air. The pilot, a weathered, taciturn man who, true to Thomas's word, asked no questions, navigated with the casual confidence of someone who had flown these routes for decades. Emily and Blackburn sat in the rear of the aircraft, watching the vast wilderness pass beneath them. From this height, Alaska revealed its true scale. Endless forests, winding rivers locked in ice, mountain ranges stretching to the horizon. A landscape that dwarfed human concerns, that had existed long before nations or wars or secrets, and would exist long after. In Fairbanks, they moved quickly, aware that their description would have been circulated to military and law enforcement. Blackburn had contacts, a former Army Ranger who owned a sporting goods store on the outskirts of town. The man provided civilian clothes, and most importantly, identification that would allow them to board a commercial flight without triggering alerts. Sullivan confirmed Harrington will be at the Defense Contractor Conference next Tuesday, Blackburn said as they prepared to leave for the airport. Meridian is showcasing new non-lethal crowd control technology. Sullivan can get us in, but only for a brief window. Enough time to confront Harrington. Enough time to record his reaction when presented with what we know. Might not be proof, but it could open doors, get the right people asking questions. The flight to Seattle was uneventful, both of them tense, expecting at any moment to be approached by security, detained, disappeared. But nothing happened. They were just two more travelers, unremarkable in the flow of humanity through the terminal. In Seattle, they split up briefly, a security precaution. Emily used the time to call Chen's sister in Harrisburg, arranging to meet the following day. Blackburn contacted Sullivan, finalizing details for their approach to Harrington at the conference. When they reunited for the overnight flight to the East Coast, both had the same news. They were being followed. Not obviously, not aggressively, but with the patient persistence of professionals who knew their targets would eventually lead them to what they sought. "We expected this," Blackburn said quietly as they waited to board. "They're not trying to take us yet. They want to see what we know, who we contact." "Letting us run to the end of our rope," Emily agreed. "Then they'll pull it tight. Then we make sure the noose is around their necks, not ours." The flight to Washington, D.C. took nearly 6 hours, crossing America while most of its citizens slept. Below them, cities glowed like colonies of light in the darkness. Seattle, Minneapolis, Chicago, Pittsburgh. The nation they had both sworn to protect, unaware of the weapons being developed in its name. The soldiers sacrificed to keep those weapons secret. They landed at Dulles International Airport just after 5 a.m., the capital still dark. Government buildings silent sentinels along the Potomac. America's seat of power, where decisions affecting millions were made daily, where secrets were currency and truth often the first casualty of national security. Sullivan met them at a small diner near the airport, a big man with the contained energy of a coiled spring. Former Delta Force, his face bore the scars of too many close encounters, his eyes carrying the weight of operations that would never appear in official histories. "You look like hell, Blackburn," he greeted them, his voice a gravelly rumble. "Good to see you too, Sullivan." They settled into a booth at the back, ordering coffee more as a reason to occupy the space than from actual desire. "Harrington speaks at 1400 hours today," Sullivan said without preamble. "Meridian's exhibition booth is in the main hall. I'm on secondary security detail. Can get you access badges, but only for 15 minutes during my shift rotation. After that, you're on your own." 15 minutes is enough, Emily said. "Just need to confront him with what we know, gauge his reaction, record it if possible." Sullivan studied her with the assessing gaze of a veteran operator. "You're the one from Sandstone, the Medal of Honor recipient." She nodded once, not elaborating. "Heard stories," Sullivan continued, "about what really happened there. Whispers in the community, contractors pulled out suddenly, area sanitized, records erased." His eyes narrowed. "What exactly did you find?" "Bioweapons," Blackburn answered, "targeting specific genetic markers, ethnic-specific weapons being developed in violation of every international convention the U.S. has signed." Sullivan's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did, a hardening, a focus. "Same program they were running in Iraq back in '91, the one you never talked about." "The same, now called the Phoenix Protocol, Phase 3 deployment scheduled to begin next month." Sullivan absorbed this, his weathered face betraying nothing. "Harrington's got serious protection. Not just Meridian security, government types. Some I don't recognize, which means agencies that don't officially exist." "We expected that," Emily said. We're not trying to arrest him, just confront him, document his reaction. And then we take everything we've gathered to someone who can't ignore it. Someone with the authority and integrity to act. Sullivan's laugh was short, humorless. Good luck finding that unicorn in Washington. The conference was held at the Wardman Convention Center, a sprawling facility that regularly hosted gatherings of defense contractors, technology firms, and government agencies. Security was tight but not impenetrable. Sullivan's credentials got them through the initial checkpoints, visitor badges hanging around their necks, identifying them as representatives of a small cybersecurity firm. The main exhibition hall buzzed with activity, booths showcasing everything from next-generation body armor to drone technology, surveillance systems to communications equipment. The business of war, sanitized and packaged for procurement officers and military decision-makers. Meridian Defense Solutions occupied a prime location near the center of the hall, a large, professionally designed display featuring videos of their latest technologies, models of equipment, representatives in tailored suits offering promotional materials to passing attendees. And there, surrounded by admirers and subordinates, stood Colonel Walter Harrington. At 68, he remained imposing, tall, broad-shouldered, with the unmistakable bearing of a career military officer. His silver hair was cut in the same style he'd worn for decades, his posture parade ground perfect despite his years. "There he is," Sullivan murmured. "You've got 12 minutes before my replacement arrives. After that, you're on your own." Emily nodded, her focus absolute. She had waited 2 years for this moment, to face the man who had ordered the death of her team, who had presented her with the Medal of Honor while knowing it was based on a lie, who had spent decades developing weapons that violated every principle of ethical warfare. "Ready?" she asked Blackburn. "Let's finish this." They approached the Meridian booth casually, like any other conference attendees interested in the company's offerings. Harrington was engaged in conversation with a group of military officers, his back partly turned toward them. Emily moved to a position where he would see her when the conversation ended. Waited. Watched. The Medal of Honor heavy in her pocket. When Harrington finally turned, his eyes passing over the crowd, the moment his gaze met hers was almost cinematic. Recognition. Shock. A momentary loss of composure quickly masked by professional control. But Emily had seen it, the confirmation she needed. She stepped forward, Blackburn at her side. "Colonel Harrington, it's been a while." His recovery was impressive. Decades of command experience, allowing him to project calm authority despite the situation. "Sergeant Shepard, unexpected to see you here. You're a long way from Alaska. Not as far as Sandstone or Iraq, 1991. The change was subtle but unmistakable, a tightening around the eyes, a barely perceptible shift in posture. "I'm afraid I don't follow." Emily withdrew the Medal of Honor from her pocket, holding it so only Harrington could see it. "You gave me this to keep me quiet. It didn't work. This isn't the place for whatever grievance you think you have, Sergeant." His voice remained steady, but his eyes darted briefly to the side, seeking security personnel. "We know about the Phoenix Protocol," Blackburn said quietly. "We have evidence linking you to the program from Desert Storm through Afghanistan. Evidence of illegal bioweapons development targeting specific ethnic groups." Harrington's face betrayed nothing, but his right hand, the hand not visible to the surrounding crowd, clenched into a fist. "Captain Blackburn, I was told you died in that training accident. Tragic to lose 2 experienced officers in such a senseless way." The threat was unmistakable. Emily felt a chill that had nothing to do with the convention center's air conditioning. "We have copies of everything," she said. "Morrison's evidence from Iraq, medical records from Sandstone, Reynolds' notebook detailing Phase 3. If anything happens to us, it all goes public." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Harrington's face. "You have no idea what you're interfering with. The implications. The necessity." Necessity? Emily's voice remained controlled, but anger simmered beneath the surface. 7 good soldiers died at Sandstone. My men, following orders, serving their country, and you had them eliminated because they saw something they weren't supposed to see. Sacrifices are sometimes required for the greater good, Sergeant. Harrington's voice had dropped to a near whisper. The Phoenix Protocol isn't just a weapon. It's a deterrent, insurance against certain geopolitical developments. It's a violation of every convention on biological warfare, Blackburn countered, a crime against humanity disguised as national security. Harrington's expression hardened. You've served, both of you. Seen the world as it really is, not as civilians wish it to be. Our enemies won't hesitate to use any advantage, any weapon. We can't afford to handicap ourselves with outdated moral constraints. The constraints aren't outdated, Emily said. They're what separate us from those we claim to be fighting. They're why the sacrifice means something. A security guard approached, not Sullivan, but another Meridian employee. Everything all right here, Colonel? Harrington smiled thinly. Fine, Jenkins. Just catching up with former colleagues. He turned back to Emily and Blackburn. I believe our conversation has reached its natural conclusion. Not quite, Emily said, her voice steady. Tomorrow morning, everything we have goes to Senator Eleanor Burke, chair of the Armed Services Committee, known for her integrity and independence from defense industry influence. Something changed in Harrington's eyes. Calculation, reassessment. Burke is a politician like any other. She'll bury this to protect the system she serves. Maybe, but I don't think so. Not when the evidence includes details of American soldiers deliberately sacrificed to protect an illegal weapons program. That's a story that transcends political divisions. Harrington studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. You were never supposed to come back, Shepard. The operation was designed to eliminate all witnesses. Your survival was unexpected. And now, a cold smile touched his lips. Now you've become a different kind of problem, one that requires a different solution. He glanced at his watch. You have approximately 3 minutes before security personnel identify you as unauthorized attendees. I suggest you use that time wisely. Emily held his gaze. This isn't over, Colonel. No, he agreed, but it will be soon. As they turned to leave, Harrington called after them, his voice low enough that only they could hear. The Medal of Honor. Keep it. You've earned it, Sergeant, just not for the reasons in the citation. It takes a special kind of courage to stand against your own government, misguided though you may be. They exited the convention center without incident, Sullivan having created a momentary distraction that diverted security's attention. Outside, the January air was cold and clear, the Washington Monument visible in the distance, a stark white needle against the blue sky. He didn't deny it, Blackburn said as they walked rapidly away from the building. Any of it. No, and he all but confirmed Phase 3 deployment is imminent. Emily's face was grim. We need to move quickly. Contact Senator Burke. Present everything we have. Harrington will try to stop us. Now that he knows our plan, he'll have people watching Burke, monitoring approaches to her office. Then we need to be smarter, more unpredictable. They hailed a taxi directing it toward Capitol Hill, not to Burke's office, but to a small coffee shop several blocks away. A location chosen for its proximity, but also its anonymity, a place to regroup and plan their final move. As they sat at a corner table, the weight of what they were attempting settled over them. 2 soldiers against a system designed to protect itself, to eliminate threats, to bury uncomfortable truths beneath layers of classification and national security justifications. Even if Burke believes us, Blackburn said quietly, even if she acts, the system has ways of containing scandals, of limiting damage. The full truth might never come out. Emily nodded, understanding the reality they faced. But the program will be exposed, shut down. The men who died at Sandstone in Iraq, they'll have some measure of justice, and future soldiers won't be placed in the position we were, forced to choose between following orders and following conscience. Blackburn studied her across the table. This woman who had faced death, deception, the betrayal of the very institution she had sworn to serve, and yet retained her core belief in justice, in the ideals their nation claimed to uphold. Whatever happens next, he said, it's been an honor serving with you, Sergeant Shepard. She smiled, a rare, genuine expression that transformed her face. Likewise, Captain. Their moment of connection was interrupted by a commotion outside. Police vehicles converging on the street, officers in tactical gear deploying with practiced efficiency. "That's not for us," Blackburn said, though his hand moved instinctively toward his concealed sidearm. Too soon. Harrington couldn't have mobilized a response this quickly. A television behind the counter switched to breaking news, an anchor with the practiced gravity of someone reporting significant events. "We're receiving reports of a major security incident at the Wardman Convention Center, site of the Defense Technology Exposition. Details are still emerging, but sources indicate shots have been fired and the facility is in lockdown." Emily and Blackburn exchanged glances of disbelief. "Harrington," she whispered, "creating chaos? Eliminating evidence?" "I don't know." The news anchor continued, receiving information through his earpiece. "We can now confirm that Colonel Walter Harrington, former Army officer and current executive at Meridian Defense Solutions, has been shot. His condition is unknown at this time. Police are searching for a suspect described as a military-aged male who fled the scene." The cafe around them faded to background noise as the implications registered. Harrington shot. A military-aged male suspect. The timing, immediately after their confrontation. "We're being framed," Emily said, her voice low and urgent. "This is the different solution he mentioned. Create an incident, blame us, discredit anything we might reveal." Blackburn was already standing, dropping cash on the table. "We need to move, now. They'll have our descriptions circulating to every law enforcement agency in the district." They exited the cafe quickly but without running, without drawing attention. The street was filled with the controlled chaos of a city responding to a security threat. Police vehicles rushing toward the convention center, pedestrians stopping to watch the commotion or check news alerts on their phones. "We can't approach Burke now," Emily said as they walked rapidly away from the developing scene. "Not with a manhunt underway." "No, but we can still get the information to her." Blackburn pulled out his phone. "Sullivan, if he's clear of the convention center, he can deliver the evidence." The call connected, Sullivan's voice tense but controlled. "Where are you?" "Clear of the scene." "You?" "Outside perimeter. Whole place is locked down. Harrington's been shot, shoulder wound, not fatal. They're saying it was you two." "It wasn't. We were already blocks away. This is Harrington's play. Discredit us, justify manhunt." A brief silence. Then, "What do you need?" "Delivery to Senator Burke, all the evidence." "Can you do it?" "Yes, meet point." Blackburn named a location, a small park 3 miles from their current position. "1 hour, bring what you need for a few days off-grid." As they continued moving away from the center of the city, Emily's mind raced through scenarios, contingencies, options that were rapidly diminishing. Their window was closing. Soon their faces would be on every news broadcast, every police bulletin. The weight of the system would descend upon them with its full force. Yet amid the urgency, the danger, she felt something unexpected, a sense of clarity, of purpose fulfilled. They had confronted Harrington, had confirmed the reality of the Phoenix Protocol, had set in motion events that, regardless of their personal fate, would expose a program that had existed in shadows for too long. The 7 men who died at Sandstone would not be forgotten. Their sacrifice would not be in vain. The truth would emerge, even if Emily and Blackburn were not there to witness it. As they walked through the streets of the capital, 2 soldiers who had sworn to defend their nation, now fugitives from its power, Emily's hand closed around the Medal of Honor in her pocket. No longer a symbol of shame or manipulation, but transformed through her actions into what it was meant to be. A recognition of courage in the face of overwhelming odds, of sacrifice for principles larger than oneself. She had not earned it for the fiction created in her citation. But perhaps she had earned it now, for standing against corruption within the very system she had sworn to serve, for refusing to allow expedience to override morality, for insisting that America live up to the ideals it claimed to defend. The Medal of Honor, the nation's highest military decoration, awarded for gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of one's life above and beyond the call of duty. In the end, Emily Shepard had earned it after all, just not in the way anyone had expected.